Welcome to the channel and welcome to today's run through of all the latest Manchester United news and transfer news, keeping you right up to date with everything. I'm Jamie. Before we get into it, smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We've got loads to go through. Reports of Mbeumo being on the verge of being done, but where's that coming from? Formal contact for Emiliano Martínez, a surprise striker target, exit news. Loads to go through. Let's jump straight into it. So let's kick off with the Bryan Mbeumo latest, because we know that he is the more likely signing that we're going to make next. We're in advanced negotiations with Brentford, have been for a couple of weeks now. We know that he wants to come to United as well. So let's go through the latest there. So David Ornstein, who was the guy that broke the news that Mbeumo wants to come to United and is one of the best journalists around, in my opinion, a tier one for definite, has said that Manchester United are exploring doing the Bryan Mbeumo deal and he wants to join them. There's a very good chance that deal happens, but they are not there yet. So David Ornstein saying, good chance it's going to happen, but we're still in that negotiation phase. Fabrizio Romano said that Manchester United remain in talks with Brentford on a daily basis, trying to get a solution. Clubs like Brighton and Brentford are always difficult to negotiate for their top players. So Romano confirming that it's a difficult negotiation to do with Brentford because they want top dollar, and they might be in a position, I've said this before, around potentially they need to replace their manager. They want to get a replacement for Mbeumo, and sometimes you need to do that alongside selling a player as well, because if once a team knows you've got money, they're going to inflate their asking price for the player that you want to sign as well. So there might be something to do with that with the hold up, or it just might be that they're trying to ask too much and put a United tax on, and Barada and everyone like that are holding firm and saying, no, we are not overpaying for players anymore. Those days are gone. And it's the right approach, I think, because if you do it for one player, it just creates a nightmare for the rest of the transfer window, because other teams will then know that you will overpay, and then that's where you end up in a position where we overspent on, pretty much every transfer over the last few years as well. So I'm cool with that. As long as we get the deal done and it's done in time for pre-season, that's the main thing. I don't care if it takes a couple of weeks, because it is what it is. We need to get the right deal, because it sets the right benchmark for the club, I think, going forward. Now, Team Talk was saying that Manchester United are on the verge of sealing a full agreement to sign Bryan Mbeumo, with significant progress made in talks with Brentford. Mets winger Sherky Salabi is lined up as his replacement. Now, Team Talk are a rumour and a gossip outlet, so I did some research, and the entire story came from none other than Fachahez, who are one of the worst sources of information out there. So it's not got any credibility behind it, unfortunately, because Fachahez have linked us in the past with Rafinha and Vinicius Jr. and all sorts. They talk absolute waffle, so I would take that story with a absolute wedge of salt, not just a pinch of salt, suggesting that their deal is closed because Brentford are lining up a replacement, but it came from Fachahez. So we'll wait and see a little bit more credibility regarding that one. Now, there has been a few stories coming out around, I don't know if these are alternatives to Mbeumo or whether we would be looking at them as rotation and backup options. I'm going to assume alternatives, but so Mohammed Kudus, so Jacob Steinberg works for The Guardian, who has actually a good source of information. They're not a bullshit or a rumour outlet, suggesting that Mohammed Kudus is a target for Manchester United. Now, remember we had story before around West Ham trying to do some sort of swap deal involving Sancho and Kudus. I think that's been dismissed, and it's not possible because of Sancho's wage demands. I don't think West Ham would be able to afford anywhere near what Jadon Sancho's wanting if he's rejected £150,000 a week at Chelsea. I mean, Kudus can play in a number of positions. He's a bit of a jack of all trades. Surely that's got to be an alternative to Mbeumo, unless we are looking for somebody as a rotation, because Mbeumo's going to go to the AFCON, and we still need a substitute to come on, or a rotation for injuries and suspensions. And if we're selling Garnacho, Anthony, Rashford, and Sancho, we do need other forwards potentially as well. I know we could play Mount there, we can play Bruno there, we can play Ahmad there as well, but they don't have the same qualities as and profile as like Mbeumo and Cunha do. So maybe it could be maybe a rotation option, but it'd be a massively expensive rotation option though. There was talk of £85 million release clause for Kudus. So I'm going to say we'll hang fire about this one and wait and see how it plays out, because I'm confused why we'd be looking for Kudus. Unless, like I said, unless we're either it's an alternative to Mbeumo if we don't get that deal done, just like we're looking at Semenyo and Eze are the other names linked currently for alternatives maybe to Mbeumo that potentially could be more likely. 35 appearances last season, though, only 5 goals, 9 assists, not exactly outstanding, or didn't exactly have the best season, I don't think, last season for West Ham, so we'll need to keep an eye on that one, but it feels to me a little bit more like that would be maybe an alternative if we don't get Mbeumo done, as with this story, which is that Tottenham Hotspur, Newcastle United, Manchester United and Arsenal are all main players in the battle to sign Xavi Simons. That came from Sport Bild. Sport Bild are actually a decent source for German news and German stories, suggesting that United might be in the battle to sign Xavi Simons. Again, I think that would only be plausible if we don't get Mbeumo done. I don't think we've got the funds when we need striker, goalkeeper, midfielder, other positions strengthening this summer. We can afford the 60 odd million pounds it's going to be for Xavi Simons after buying Cunha and Mbeumo, and one of them's on the bench, or one of them's playing wing back, or maybe one of them's playing striker. I don't know, but I don't know if that's the plan. I mean, you could potentially play Cunha and Mbeumo and Simons as your front three, but would it work? Who knows? But yeah, this feels a bit more like this is potentially backups being lined up for if the Mbeumo deal doesn't go through. But that's all the latest regarding Mbeumo and potentially some alternatives to keep an eye on. But I'd want to see how it plays out first. But give us your thoughts and your shouts on that in the comments. Now, what are the other positions we're going to be hopefully pivoting towards or strengthening after is the striker. Let's go through all the latest regarding the striker. So Manchester United is showing interest in striker Tolu Akorodare. United scouts have pushed Akoradare's name, and he is someone that Christopher Vivell and Jason Wilcox are aware of and appreciate. Now, that came from Graham Bailey. Graham Bailey can be a little bit hit and miss regarding the situation as well, so I would want to see a little bit more credibility. But what do we think about that? Not a player like, I've been waiting for something like this transfer window, like an unknown name, a hidden gem, somebody that's, fucked out of nowhere where you're like, hold on, who's this guy? Never heard of him. I'm not going to profess to be a professional when it comes to players from Genk, because that's where he plays. But looks fairly decent. 45 appearances, 23 goals, 7 assists, or 30 goal contributions in 45 games. Nigerian, 24 years old. Looks okay from highlights, but I'm not don't take my word for that. I'm sure one of you in the comments will know way more and will let us know below. Good option, bad options, valued at 18 million euros, I think, on transfer market. So not one that's going to break the bank statistically, though. Looks very good in terms of his stats. Top 99% for expected goals, 99 for shots, 86 for assists, 99 for expected assists, 89 for shot creating actions. Looks a real potential player, but we'll need to keep an eye on it. I would want to see a bit more credibility as well, but is this one that they could pivot to if we don't get Gyökeres and we don't get Ekitike? It would have Christopher Vivell's name written all over it, this sort of striker signing. I like this. I like getting linked with all these players. Whether we'll get them or not, who knows? We'll have to wait and see. I'd want to see a lot more credibility than where this story came from, but it's another name in the hat, another interesting option. Give us your shouts though and your thoughts. If you know more about the player, let me know in the comments. Going to be really interested to hear what you think about the player. Good option, bad option. Give us your shouts in the comments below, because I'd be really interested to hear what you say regarding that. And then let's quickly go through the rest. So Ekitike is another player we're obviously linked with. Romano has said that Manchester United called the agents of Hugo Ekitike in recent days to gain an understanding of his situation. Chelsea and Liverpool were also heavily interested. I have heard actually a rumour that Liverpool might be looking at going for Isak, which would be a turn up for the book. And there's a report at the end I'm going to link in potentially with that story, so that could be one to keep an eye on. But Romano's saying we've called the agents. David Ornstein, though, was saying that it doesn't necessarily think it's as big as what it's being made out to be, where basically we're just making inquiries at the moment for strikers, and that's it, because we're doing our due diligence and speaking, and because we don't want to get caught short, where if we do get Mbeumo done and then we go for a striker and that striker's already in negotiations with another club and decided to join them, so we don't want to be left out, is effectively the way what Ornstein was saying regarding the striker and particularly Ekitike. The latest on Gyökeres is that Fabrizio Romano said, I don't think Gyökeres has said no to Man United. I think Gyökeres told his agents to tell Manchester United that his priority is Arsenal, which is different because his situation could change in the coming weeks. So Romano going back on who's the one that broke the story that said basically Gyökeres had said no and wanted to join Arsenal, kind of backtracking a little bit on what he said. And the story that broke there saying that he hasn't said no to United. He's just prioritising Arsenal. I think he's prioritising Champions League, which might be one to keep an eye on, because if Juventus are the other team that are interested in him, and if he doesn't go to Arsenal, would he prioritise Juventus over United if it's just us two left in the race? Who knows? Now, interestingly, reports are that Jorge Mendes has now joined the Victor Gyökeres case. Now, that would be interesting because Jorge Mendes normally only comes in when it's the time to, finalise deals, or when deals are not quite getting over the line he got involved in the Ugarte situation when we couldn't necessarily get that deal over the line as well, which is really interesting and definitely one to keep an eye on, that Jorge Mendes is getting involved, whether that would be to force a deal or a move through for Arsenal, potentially United as well. But we need a wait and see. Like I said, I do think we're still in for Gyökeres. I think we're just waiting to see what happens with Arsenal before making a move, and that we're looking at other strikers as a backup should the deal for Gyökeres not be viable because he chooses to go to Arsenal, or because he goes to Arsenal. But we'll bring any updates on that. But give us your thoughts and shouts on that in the comments below. Now, interestingly, Jorge Mendes is Emi Martinez's new agent. That came from Fabrizio Romano. Now, the reason that's interesting is because South American reports, who are fairly decent, have said that Manchester United have made first formal contact with Emi Martinez's agent over a transfer. United want him as their new #1 goalkeeper. Martinez and his family wants to stay in England. And they were also saying that if there are no problems in the negotiations between Emi Martinez and Manchester United, it will be his new club. Now, that's bold claims from South American reports, who are fairly decent as well, suggesting that United are in formal contact with Emi Martinez, and that if there's no issues with the negotiations, it will be his new club. Now, interestingly, Ben Jacobs said that Emi Martinez has made it clear that he is interested in signing for Manchester United, and Aston Villa have refused to rule this out. It could take close to £40 million to sign him. United have not made a final call on replacing Onana. I mean, £40 million I think would be ridiculous for Emi Martinez. I think, but with Aston Villa's financial situation, I think they could do a deal for a lot less than that. Like, if you could get Martinez for £20-25 million, remember Aston Villa might be interested in Garnacho. They still might hold a bit of interest in Rashford if his move to Barcelona doesn't materialise, and we'll go through some Rashford updates in a bit. I think if you could get him for less, I think it would be a really interesting option to bring in, and that's maybe a way that you do force Onana out. I've been saying this: if you sell Bayinda, use the money to get Martinez, and then you force Onana out that way, because he then is not the #1, and you've got a decent replacement. I mean, Martinez wouldn't be my #1 choice to bring in as a goalkeeper, but there's so many. I can see the benefits of doing it. He's experienced. He's 32 years old, which is not that old for a goalkeeper. I think he's got a bit of shithousery around him as well, and I like that. I do think we need more bastards in the team, because we've got such a soft team, and I do think that actually we need some people like that have a bit of fire in their belly and can wind up opponent players, and I think his leadership and experience at the back, when we've got a fairly young, inexperienced defence in Yoro and Heaven, and even De Ligt's only 25. I know he's a bit more experienced because he's been around big clubs, but in terms of age, he's still a young defender as well. So I do think the benefit of bringing in someone like Martinez, it's just, is he a massive improvement? He's still got mistakes in him as well. So, but I would do it. I would take Martinez over Onana any day of the week. Fabrizio Romano, though, said that Manchester United will only sign a keeper if Onana leaves. I don't see United signing another goalkeeper to provide competition for Onana, which I don't necessarily agree with, because if Bayinda goes, we're going to have to bring in a replacement, and what's the point in bringing in a replacement if they're not going to be competition for Onana? I think that's the worst case scenario that's going to happen, is Bayinda will go, we'll bring in a #2, but that #2 has got to be somebody that can push Onana, surely. So we'll wait and see what happens on the goalkeeper situation, but interesting. Give us your thoughts on that in the comments. So South American reports are suggesting that actually we've made formal contacts with his agent. His agent, as the previous slide said, is now Jorge Mendes. I don't know, Ben Jacobs, who's been fairly decent this summer as well, saying that actually that might be, he wants to come to United. Aston Villa aren't afraid or aren't going to necessarily block selling him £40 million, though, would be way too expensive. But give us your thoughts and shouts on that in the comments below, as I'm sure you will. Now, let's go through the rest of the exit news. So, Altay Bayindir has been offered to Turkish side Göztepe, who are a sister club of Southampton. The player is said to be keen on a return. Is said to not be keen on a return to Turkey yet. So, a bit more stories around, United offering Bayindir to clubs as well, which does look like they are looking to move him. That came from a decent Turkish source. Fabrizio Romano and Rasmus Højlund said that Inter is still in talks with Manchester United for Rasmus Højlund. They would prefer a loan, but if that's not possible, they'll settle for a loan, a low amount to buy him. Again, that would depend on what the PSR would be for Højlund, but Romano again confirming that Inter are still in talks for Højlund. They're looking at a loan. We're looking at maybe sell him, but it would have to be cheap for Inter to buy him. So maybe a loan with an option or an obligation to buy might be the solution there. On Jadon Sancho, Fabrizio Romano again said that Napoli are progressing in talks to sign Dan N'Doye with personal terms now almost agreed. Jadon Sancho remains on Napoli list, but not at current salary or fee conditions. They don't want to pay. Reports yesterday were United are looking for like £25 million for Sancho. Apparently they don't want to pay that. And then there's the obvious issue with his wages as well. What Romano said was Manchester United want a permanent transfer for Jadon Sancho and don't want to accept loan proposals. Napoli only want Sancho on loan and don't want to sign him permanently this summer as well. So that's where there's a bit of conflict with Napoli. Maybe the later it drags on in the window, if there's no permanent solution found for Sancho, that would obviously change our opinion and change our mind. So maybe Napoli would wait on that deal to see if they could do a loan at the end of the transfer window if we don't get a permanent solution for Sancho. And Sky Italia, though, would say that Jadon Sancho has already said yes to Napoli for a possible transfer to Italy. So starting to get a few more reports regarding Jadon Sancho and his exit as well, but we need to wait and see how that plays out because the sticking point's going to be his wages. And then if Napoli don't want to pay the asking price for us, I think we need about £15 million for a monetization as well. So maybe we could do a deal. But again, this might be one that drags on because we're going to want more for Sancho. If Napoli don't want it, we're in a little bit of a weak position, I think, when it comes to Sancho, because clubs know we don't want him and we want to sell him, so they can wait as long as possible. And they know also that he's on a high wage and we want to get rid of his wages as well. So the longer it drags on for other teams, it's better for them than it is for us. Obviously, it's better for us to sell him or do something as soon as we can, but that might not be possible. But we'll need to wait and see how that plays out. And then the Sun was saying that Newcastle are interested in signing Marcus Rashford, but it came from the Sun, so we'll need to take that with a pinch of salt. But interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, there were rumours that Liverpool might be going for Alexander Isak, and would Rashford then potentially be a replacement for Isak at Newcastle? I could see that. Playing out if the rumours and reports are to be believed, but they are just rumours, so don't take my word for that. But that could be a scenario that plays out. But I read this in the Manchester Evening in the Manchester Evening News. Let me put my teeth back in. According to Marca, Rashford is willing to present himself as the cheaper option to Barca than their other targets, Nico Williams and Luis Diaz. In doing so, Rashford is reportedly willing to do things within his control to push through a move to Camp Nou this summer. So Marca is suggesting that Rashford is desperate to join Barcelona, that he's willing to take a pay cut or make himself a cheaper alternative to Nico Williams and Luis Diaz, who are believed to be Barcelona's first and second choice. They are actually quite far ahead in the Nico Williams deal as well, so we'll need to wait and see how that plays out, whether Barcelona would still go for Rashford and maybe use him as a striker, as a rotation with Lewandowski up front, or he can play left and right, so he is a versatile player, so maybe there could be something there. But according to that report, Rashford's doing all he can to try and get his dream move to Barcelona. You can't blame him for that as well. It's just whether Barcelona are going to do it. It looks like they're going for Nico Williams, and then with that then put us in a situation where Rashford has to, start looking at other clubs as well. Because remember, he's turned down loads of interest in Italy in January to try and get his move to Barcelona. They couldn't sell Fati, so he ended up going on loan to Villa. He's been waiting for Barcelona, and they might now move on to other players, it is what it is, but we'll need to wait and see how that plays out. But give us your thoughts on that in the comments below. Give us your thoughts on all the other topics discussed in today's video, because that's you all up to date with the latest news and transfer news. Smash a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. See you in the next one.